On behalf of the Sikh Sangat and the committee of Singh Sabha Gurdwara Seven Kings, I'd like to welcome you all to the Sikh Channel Youth Show. This week, it's been a while since we've met. Last time we had a show from this Gurdwara, a youth show, was the 15th of March. And at that time, the issue of Paisab by Balwant Singh Rajwana had just come transparent, and we were working towards an issue where we thought Paisab would be hung on the 31st. Now, as you've all been following the story, and as it gripped the whole Sikh nation, we saw a lot happen in those 3 weeks. We saw an awakening, we saw a mass interest, and I think it made people reflect upon what they feel, Sikh is really about, and what really happened at that time, and perhaps even go further back in what's happened in the past to Sikhs. Now, it's interesting to know, why did Bhai Rajwana's case captivate us? What was so amazing about it? What was so interesting about it? And I think, I was looking through this, and I think, when I look at Paisab, when I first saw the image of Paisab, it felt like it's a person here who's got a strong character. One of the things I think that was strong about him is that he bowed down to the Akal Takht Sahib, and there didn't seem to be any baggage, in the sense of there wasn't a Jathebandi baggage, there wasn't affiliations, there didn't seem to be any hidden agendas. Paisab had done something, had carried out an act, and he wasn't going to hide away from it. He wasn't going to shy away from it. And I think those kind of qualities is something that reminds us really of what Sikh is really about. And it's almost like it was a living Sakhi. We grow up on these Sakhi of amazing, brave Sikhs. And I feel personally that it was almost like you were witnessing a Sakhi unfolding in front of you. And it captivated us for 3 weeks. And there was Lehra, Kesri Lehra, we all came under one Nishan Sahib. Something, that I've not experienced in my lifetime. I was very young, probably when the last major Lehr took place. So, and I think for most of us as well, in my age group and younger than me, it's probably the first time that we experienced a united, a feeling of unity and a feeling of direction. So, whilst Paisab, whilst we as Sikhs, as young Sikhs, felt very empowered by what Paisab was doing, and very attached to the whole story and looking up to the situation, there was the press, and the press would describe this as the mainstream media would often pick up and describe this as by Balwant Singh Rajwana as a militant terrorist organization. Part of an extremist group, and those are the stigmas that we had to deal with. So every time we would Google and read a press report, that's what we'd read. And in my view, that whole description of a militant, of a terrorist, this is what we're going to discuss today. We fall into that category very easily. Sikhs. Often news reports, the first thing that anytime a Sikh makes a stand, I believe, or does something, it gets categorized as an approach of militancy. And in my view, I refuse to accept that term, because in my view, the term militant is used as a negative term. It's used as a term of confrontation. It's used as a term of aggressive behavior, almost like a euphemism for belligerent behavior. And that's what I feel the word militant is. And when you put that term in a news report, what you're doing is you're describing the actions of somebody as something that's incorrect, that's wrong. And that's a big battle that we have at the moment. And that misconception or that feeling or that portrayal of Sikhs is something that not only non-Sikhs are willing to put forward, but I think many Sikhs are guilty of accepting that view and even promoting that view. And that's going to be the aim of the discussion today. So the title we're actually going to discuss today is Militants or Freedom Fighters. That's the aim of the discussion. So without much further to do, we're very fortunate to have a good group of young Naujawan Sikhs from the local area. And we have the likes of Bhai Sukhbir Singh, who's to my right-hand side. who's a local Sevadar. We have Bhai Teerat Singh, another Sevadar from the London area, who's had some big involvement, or some interesting involvement with the Delhi Sikhs, and it'd be interesting to bring Bhai Sahib into the conversation as we progress. We have Bhai Shamsher Singh, who you may be familiar with. You've probably seen him on TV before. And we have Bhai Baljit Singh, another familiar Sikh. And then you're familiar probably with all the other Sikhs in the audience there. I'm not going to introduce everyone here, but we're beginning to become familiar faces. So what makes a Sikh, what gives the Sikh a rebellious nature, or rebellious in the terms of how people may see it? And why do Sikhs react to the negative circumstances around them? And the question often is tracked back, when Rajwana discussions were taking place on the radio station, maybe on the BBC Asia Network, for instance, they'd always track it back to 84, and then, they'd track it back to 1978. And then some people would track it back to 1947. And then we can go further back, and do we track it back to 1925, in the Gurdwara Lair reform movement? Do we track it back to 1849, the annexation of Punjab? Do we track it back to 1708, when the Khalsa was formed? Or do we really track it back to 1469, from the moment that Guru Nanak Dev Ji came onto this earth, came onto this planet? And I think that's something we really need to address, because often, we dissociate Guru Nanak Dev Ji's stand, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's approach, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the Sakya of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, to this modern day Sikhi that we have, and to some of these movements and political movements that have taken place. Over the years, we're classified as Sikhs are reclassified in mainstream media often as being hot-headedness. And I think that's something that, again, we need to address. We need to combat that stereotype. So, the question I want to really put to you guys out there is, if anyone's willing to come forward on this, this is an open question. Why have Sikhs chosen a path of self-determination and sacrifice in a very short period of 500 years? If there's anyone else that is willing to put anything into this discussion, then I'll pass the mic on.
Hanji, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think you make some very interesting points there, Virji. I think if we do take it back to the beginning, Guru Nanak Dev Ji was a revolutionary. The things that he was saying fit very easily and comfortably in today's context. Equality for all, no discrimination based on caste or gender or faith. Now, those things fit very nicely and very comfortably into today's world. But at the time that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was championing these causes, it was obviously the opposite of comfortable. It was upsetting everybody that you could possibly upset. So it upset the ruling Mughals at the time, because obviously he was questioning their authority and saying that everybody should be equal, everybody should have equal rights, and everybody has the same freedom to follow their religious faith, etc. He was upsetting the apple cart, really, with regards to female equality as well, because that wasn't something that anybody wanted to hear. So in every possible way, Guru Nanak Dev Ji was a revolutionary. And it always is the fact that Sikhs, if they stay true to their ideal, will inevitably end up in conflict with tyrannical governments, whether that's Delhi since 1984, certainly even prior to that, since 47, whether it was with the British or whether it was the Mughals. We could have, had we chosen to, live comfortably with each one of those groups, but it would have meant us selling out really our ideals and changing what Sikhi was. If we're to stay true, or we'd stay true to Sikh principles, then, as I say, inevitably we will come up into conflict. It's not that we go out looking for these things, but equally, I don't think that Sikhism would have actually lasted 500 years if we'd been willing to be amorphous and just change with the time. So, it might be that those type of concepts now of equality, etc., are very much in vogue. But even if they weren't, we'd still stand true to those. The way that the Sikhs are portrayed in the media is clearly it's intentional. Now we hear the word terrorist since 9/11. That's become sort of the most popular way of maligning a group or a movement. But going back to the 80s, what we were termed was extremists. That what you used to hear all the time, what was coming out of India was Sikh extremists, hardliners, militants. All of these things, again and again, we hear. Now, it's interesting when we look at recent interviews with people who know Bhai Sahib Rajwana ji, so his family, and people emphasize consistently and constantly the same thing. He was very nirmal. His manner was very gentle. He was a very gentle man, and that seems to be, for some people, probably at odds with what Sikhs think of themselves, or how we think of ourselves as, or what we think of as positive traits within a Sikh. Within a Sikh, a positive trait is that gentleness, not necessarily, being quick to anger at all. It is about being very gentle, and those sensitive souls, those are the ones which are touched by these sorts of things. So Bhai Rajwana, when he saw these things happening in front of his eyes, and he was part of the police, he was part of that same system, he just couldn't handle it. His heart was sensitive enough to be hurt so deeply that he knew that he had to do something. And again, when we look at Sikhs through history, whenever anybody has decided to take the ultimate step and give their life in order for what they believe, it always has been off the back of their own hurt and their own pain, and seeing what's going on with the community, not necessarily their own. So, even with if we go back to Nomit Pasha Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, when he basically gave his life to protect the rights of others, again, it was the understanding of sensitivity, or the sensitive feeling of a heart which is just and right. And again, with Bhai Rajwana, I think the thing that's really struck a chord, and what's had resonance throughout the Sikh nation really, has been that his stance has been absolutely truthful. It's been absolutely pure. It's been absolutely selfless. And again, as somebody who takes a bit of an interest in history, you hear these things, that one person can make a difference. One person doing a selfless, true and honest and sincere act can actually change the world, they say. And I wondered whether that could happen in the modern setting, but what's happened now has proven to me that that's absolutely the case.
Some really valid points there by yourself. I mean, I think you're 100% right. It's almost like we need to, it's like a decriminalizing act. It's almost like we have to take that criminal element that the media want to portray, or people in general want to portray on the actions of Sikhs. And I refuse to accept that, because calling the behavior, or calling the actions that the likes of Bhai Rajwana takes, or any other Gursikh, is a direct attack on my family. It's an attack on my children. You're calling my children militant. You're calling my mother and father militant. You're calling myself, my wife, and I refuse to accept that. And you look at someone like you look at Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Guru Arjan Dev Ji was a national threat. It wasn't put to torture and sentenced to death without being a threat. If you want to say it that way, I mean it in not a negative way, but that's how the Mughal Empire, and that's how the Mughal administration would have seen Guru Arjan Dev Ji. It was a national threat, and they would have put and they put Guru Arjan Dev Ji to death. Now this is Guru Arjan Dev Ji who compiled Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. This is Guru Arjan Dev Ji who built Darbar Sahib and put developed the Amritsar. The city where we pray, we do our ardas to every day, where we focus upon, where we wish to visit. This is Guru Arjan Dev Ji. So do we call Guru Arjan Dev Ji a criminal? Do we call him an extremist? Do we call him a terrorist? That's how it would have been portrayed then. It'd be interesting to read. I haven't read many Persian pieces of work or any writings at the time, but I'm sure there was a writing at the time when Guru Arjan Dev Ji was described in one of the Mughal court's journals. And it was in a negative, it was in a negative way. Yeah, exactly. So we do have that issue there as well. But the agitations and the campaigns and everything that the Sikhs have been involved in over the last 500 years. We look at Baba Banda Singh Bahadur. One thing which I find really amazing about Baba Banda Singh Bahadur's period in time is that he built the Khalsa Foundation. He built the Khalsa Nation, the Khalsa Sarkar, the country itself in 20 months. That's 20 months. That's an extremely short time period. Now, we're talking about 27, 28 years from 1984, and we're talking about a 20-month campaign. So what was so amazing about that period of time? Why was it that, in 20 months, Baba Banda Singh Bahadur was able to create a nation and then also step back. He could have taken on this guerrilla warfare and carried on and built a larger nation. But what they did is took a step back, focused on infrastructure, put a currency in place, and built the foundations and showed us that Sikhs are capable of running a nation. Sikhs are capable of systems. Sikhs are capable of building an infrastructure. So that's an amazing example in that period of time. I don't know if anyone wants to step into the conversation.
I just want to mention one point from what you were saying, which is that throughout the history of Sikhs, even with the touching on what Bhaisal said about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, sometimes people make the mistake of saying that Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj started the military aspect of Sikhi. But if you look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he was our first political prisoner, our first political activist. He was in detention due to him speaking out against an oppressive regime, a kind of regime that probably doesn't exist today. Hopefully we'll never see that. In the same way, throughout Sikhi, the message hasn't changed, and it comes down to the authenticity of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. And because of that, the message hasn't changed. And also, if you look throughout the ages, Shaheed Singhs haven't changed either. Their actions have not changed. Neither has the way that their actions are classified by oppressive regimes. So the same way that
back then they were decriminalized.
Definitely. So this same way Bhaira Jwana is treated as an extremist or a militant, decades in the future we'll look back at those actions and think differently. The same way the repressive regime at the time classified Bhagat Singh's actions in the same way, and the same way that the Guru Sahibs before in our Sikh history have been classified as rebels. And I think coming to what you're saying about self-determination, obviously this message isn't from Guru Bani, but Sikhs have always had that one concept in terms of Bagi Jabacha. It's either one or the other. We will live free, and we will take action against those who are trying to oppress us and others.
Just coming to that question that you asked, why are Sikhs classed as militants and extremists? I think it comes down to I was speaking to Singh. What he was saying, Sikhi is based. The leadership principles of Sikhi is based around ethics. So it's principle-based ethics rather than rule-based ethics. And because of the fact that Sikhi is dictated by principles and ethics, that brings us into conflicts with systems that seek to oppress others. So if you look at slavery, that was legal, in the Americans. If you look at the actions of the Mughal government where they were persecuting Sikhs, those were legal actions. So if you look at what Balwant Singh did, in terms of the law, that you could call that an illegal action, but it's the same law that said the invading of Harmandir Sahib was a legal action. So because Sikhi is based on these strict principles and these ethics, principle-based ethics, which says that, you should treat people the same, regardless of their social standing, regardless of their gender or the amount of wealth they have, regardless of their level of education or the color of their skin. We should all treat people the same. And that's just one example of an ethical principle that Sikhi is based on, and that says that Sikhs should give their lives to preserve these types of ethical principles. When you've got systems like the Mughal government, or you've got capitalist systems where there's a few people that are controlling the wealth and they are dictating to others, and you have lower classes, a Sikh can't exist in a system like that. It'll always inevitably bring a Sikh to conflict within that system, because Sikhi is based on ethics and principles. So I think that's a really, if you look at the why aspect, I think that's a driving factor of why Sikhs are put in a position where they take actions where sometimes you can say, according to the law, this action can be seen as extreme, or they can call it whatever they want. But if you look at one thing specific, there was an undeclared war of the state against the Sikhs, and in an undeclared war, in a state of war, things happen. All sides can be guilty of taking actions, and I'm sure Balwant Singh, he didn't want to spend his life in prison. He didn't want to have to take all the other things involved, not just Balwant Singh, all the other things that had to go away from their families, leave wives at home, leave children at home. I'm sure they do that. It's not something that they did out of choice. It was necessity that they had to sacrifice everything that they had and take a step based on their principles and based on ethics, and that's a driving factor of the thing that brings Sikhs into conflict with the legal systems. So I think I just wanted to mention that point.
I think you're 100% right there. I mean, if you look at it this way as well, I think if you look at who else is going to make the stand, it does boil down to the Sikh. Ahmad Shah Abdali plundered and raided India 9 times. Who took the stand? The Sikhs. Baratera, okay, even more than that. Who took the stand? The Sikhs. None of the other groups were able to take the stand, and it simply boils down to that. I mean, one thing that was really interesting I've got some facts here, I think, when I was looking through, looking into some research on this topic, and the Indian state of emergency in 1975 that Indira Gandhi called, which she brought, they say that she brought democracy to a grinding halt at that period of time. Now, according to Amnesty International, 140,000 people had been arrested without trial during the 20 months of Indira Gandhi's emergency. Of them, 40,000 had come from India's 2% minority. That's 40,000 out of the 140,000. That's, what, 30%? That's a significant figure. Now, the first mass protest in the country against the state of emergency in 1975, the Campaign to Save Democracy, was organized by the Sikhs, and it was launched in Amritsar on the 9th of July in 1975. So no one else made the stand. I mean, and the state of emergency wasn't called because of the Sikhs at that point in time. Indira Gandhi saw threats in many in different places, and she called a state of emergency. But the first people who took the stand, we hear Sakya about Sant Kartar Singh carrying out big morcha, the Akali Dals at the time. Regardless of what we think of them now, at the time they made massive stands. We had a homeless guy sleeping here who was in prison during the state of emergency. So a lot took place at that time. And then, they're all going through. Who took the stand? The Sikhs. Nobody else. Who took the stand in the time of Ahmad Shah Abdali? Sikhs. Who took the stand at the time of the Kashmiri Pandits being persecuted? Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib. So again, it's and who took the stand against the British? Exactly. I mean, that's the figures that we constantly get back, is how a big part the Sikhs played in the independence movement at the time. And ironically, you can go further back in the first independent movement against the British was very few of us know this about Baba Maharaj Singh Naurangabad. Naurangabad, and Babaji, this is a Baba, Mahapurush, who's from the lineage of Bhai Daya Singh. Okay, so it's Bhai Daya Singh's lineage, the same lineage that you've the sons of Hoti Mardan, the same lineage the sons of Rara Sahib all come from. And you've got such an amazing activist like Baba Maharaj Singh Naurangabad, who stood up against the British in as early as, I think, 1845, at the time when the British were trying to come into Punjab. And he became such a big threat to the British nation, the empire at the time, that he wasn't even put on trial. He was exiled to Singapore, and he was kept in solitary confinement in Singapore. And Babaji died in 1859, I believe, 1859 in Singapore. And where his body was cremated, he was such a powerful figurehead that at that time there was a significant Hindu Tamil community, and they started, they would visit the site as pilgrimage, because that's how powerful Baba Maharaj Singh Naurangabad was. Now, these are the kind of things that we had. These were the dere of those times had a structure, and it had a message. Yeah, they had a message, but they also had a structure. They had an infrastructure, and it was a haven for political activism at the time. People went there. Now, Naurangabad, prior to Baba Maharaj Singh, there was Baba Bir Singh. Now, another Shaheed, Baba Bir Singh Naurangabad, who became a Shaheed at the time due to some misunderstandings. But they had artillery, they had horsemen, they were political activists. So what's gone wrong? If anything, today, if you look at today's time, we've got probably more sants than we've ever had, more Babe, more Dere than we've ever had. So where's that spark gone?
I think the biggest thing we had back then, we knew how to tackle the issue. We had the knowledge, we had the resources, and the foresight to see this is the issue, this is how do we deal with it. It was. People visionaries. I mean, Jim Mahapurkham, they are, in terms of writers, and they are, if you look at the people sometimes refer to a lot of poetic people who have visionary ideas. And if you actually believe in the visionary idea, that's when it becomes a reality. What we're lacking at the present moment is a visionary idea, which is practical, which is doable. And I think one of the biggest things is we haven't been so successful in changing our tact and dealing with the issue. We haven't become politically very active. Back then, when the idea was to learn swordmanship, when the idea was to learn weaponry and the art of the governance, we learned that quite well. But now the idea is in the new area, playing their game on their level. And for that kind of standard, you need to be a bit corrupt. Well, not corrupt, but you have to have a mind.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Maybe a mind that can actually look through the corruption and see where it wants to get to, but then play the game. But unfortunately, Sikhs have always been outmaneuvered due to their simplicity, due to their ethics and values. And I think, in a way, that's as well as that being our biggest achievement, living up to our values, it's also a way, and a failure as well. Well, I wouldn't say a failure, but the modern society we see as a failure. Modern world we see as a failure. The Sikhs haven't been able to adjust themselves to maybe play this game. So I think what we need to do, keeping within our principles, is find a system that we can fight the system back. Find a political structure that works within our system. And I think we have it, especially within Maharaj, in Gurbani. Like Singh said, Nimrata is a concept of being Deyavan. But on the same concept, be a Deyavan, what do you win when you're so nirmal, when you're Deyavan? You win hearts, you win minds. And at the present moment, Sikhs are not doing that. We need to win minds and hearts. How are we going to do that? That's open to discussion, open to our abilities. But that's what we've got to do with the wider community, with our own community. And I think our own community at the moment is suffering more than the outside communities. You know, sadi apni community nu gyan di lod ya. You know, only Bali community lod ni kiya as well. And politically, our community are not very mobile. So to mobile our communities, we've got to get the message out there. This is what you need to do in our areas, and fight a different war. Today's war of militancy or of that kind of structure, we've tried it and we haven't been very successful at it.
Do you think it was needed at the time, and then maybe the times changed? It's changed now.
It did. I think it was needed at the time to set a standard. Look, if we need to rise to this standard, we can, as a last resort. But look, Guru Nevi, a lot of things were resolved by dialogue. If you think of Bahadur, when Babur invaded India, from Babur to up to Jahangir, up to Akbar Badshah, all the gurus dialogued with the emperors, and through dialogue they resolved a lot of issues. Only after that period of Jahangir period, the gurus had to take a stance of shastra, or taking up the weapon to defend themselves. But prior to that, the gurus had a lot of misunderstandings through dialogue. So if we can do it then, we can do it now, but we need to reawaken as intelligence and bring that forward and use that as a first. And I think that's where we need to go.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think also another important time in our history was actually a time of the missiles. Some great political things did happen at that time. You know, Singhs were able to override the Mughals, override all the strong Muslim empires at the time. For example, Bhai Baghel Singh was able to take over Delhi, and he was so powerful at that time when he took over Delhi that the ruling government at the time, then they decided that to get rid of him, they gave him the chance to make all the gurdwaras in Delhi. So these are all the kind of there was a lot of political foresight at that point in time with those individuals. Even other missiles such as the Ramgarhia missiles, their foresight, you know, they built the fortress Harmandir Sahib, the bungas, the Kal bungas. They're not just fancy towers. They were there to see people coming from far and keeping over the Harmandir Sahib, which was the main point or the end of the. And I was just thinking another point which I had put down. I mean, about the media. I think as we were all following. The internet postings by the India newspapers, and at the same time, while they were calling Pai Rojwana a terrorist, at the same time, the National Human Rights Committee of India highlighted over 2,000 cases of false encounter in Gurdaspur, and that was during the time of Byanta when he was actually the CM up to 1995. But again, during that whole opening, the same newspaper would describe Pai Rojwana as a terrorist, but also they would identify that during Byanta's reign, these things happened. So again, it literally shows the double standard which exists.
to brush off, and that's after Darbar Sahib was attacked and after the Delhi riots, there was an Air India bombing that took place. Yeah, and that's become a massive stigma that's attached to Sikhs, and it's a very hard thing for us to brush off. Now, you know, like we say, only Akal Purkh knows the truth. I mean, there have been books that have come out there. They've been writing. Soft Target was a book, I believe, that was written by yeah,
it was from the Toronto Star, and it's that the Kanishka air, the bombing of I think it was Flight 182, which was the Kanishka bombing. That was the single most damaging event for the freedom movement. Lenin wrote, you know, if you want to find out who is responsible for a crime, look at who it advantages the most, who gets the greatest advantage from that. Now, we were involved in various actions over that period, the Sikh community. I remember myself, you know, when Indira Gandhi was assassinated, there was generally the consensus was it was an absolutely right act, it was the right thing to do, and there's great pride in you know, taking out, assassinating her, and other various acts as well, and events which happened. There was almost complete support from the whole Sikh community. Now, Kanishka, the bombing was entirely different. I, to this date, have never heard any Sikh talk about that in any kind of positive way, and even at the time there was a bit of bewilderment as to why has this happened, who's responsible for this. And it's also true that the Canadian, Canada itself is you know, built on fairly liberal principles, and I think it would also be fair to say that the Canadian government was probably or the Canadian people were the most supportive of the Sikh movement up until that stage. Now, the bombing of the flight, that flight had an absolute catastrophic effect on the perception of the Canadian people with regards to their own Sikh community.
To this day, we can't live it down.
To this day, that was followed not too long afterwards by, again, I know this is a fact. How I can't possibly talk about this or certainly convince anybody here and now. But the issues and the controversy about about eating in the langar hall, so pangti chabana, sitting on chairs, which again became a huge issue in Canada, and saw fights within Gurdwara, people attacking each other. All of this again orchestrated at the behest of the Indian government. That the third agency within India, and be under no misconceptions about this, has been carrying out a covert war against the Sikhs in the diaspora outside. They're very, very conscious.
People think that third agency is a conspiracy theory.
It's not a myth. They're at Lordy Road. You can go and see their offices there. It's the research and analysis wing of the Indian government. They're absolutely involved in this. There is example after example which will show you that there is an agenda which sets out really to malign the Sikh community outside of India. Within India, they don't see us as much of a threat. They realise that we don't have much of a media, we don't have really much say, and they're able to shape our opinion, the opinion of the community, simply by putting people into positions of power, and also by the fact that they control all of the media. So back to Operation Blue Star, Doordarshan was the state-owned television channel and the only channel, and all the other news agencies had to take any information that they were getting about what was going on through them. That's including the BBC. So we had guys like Mark Tully, who again, became and still lives in India, quite sycophantic really when it comes to his relationship with India, and he referred to consistently the Sikhs as militants, as terrorists, etc., etc., etc. Nobody looked really at what was going on prior to that. Nobody looked at the fact that Sikhs were being killed indiscriminately across Punjab in the run-up to 1984, and the fact that this was a premeditated assault on the Golden Temple. And also the biggest fact really here is that the resistance that came from that attack by the Indian army was absolutely necessary. Had that resistance not occurred, then the world could have justifiably said, well, actually the Sikh spirit's dead. The Sikhs have gone. The Sikh spirit does not reside in bricks and mortar or in great huge buildings. It resides in the hearts and minds of the Sikhs. And if there hadn't been any resistance that day, then I think that would have been a far more damaging outcome for the Sikhs. I mean, as it turned out, sorry?
Often people say that the knocking down of the Akal Takht Sahib was an atrocious act. But I think what people fail to see is how many times the Akal Takht Sahib has been knocked down in our history.
Very symbolic as well that, you know, we know about the concept of miri biri, so we talk about, you know, the spiritual power being vested. I suppose if we look at it symbolically within the Amritsar complex, we'd say, okay, so Darbar Sahib, this is the seat of our spiritual sovereignty, if you will, and the Akal Takht is our temporal seat of authority, and it was the Akal Takht that they sought to wipe out. It's very telling, because that characterises really India's plan. India wants to have a Sikh community. They don't mind a Sikh community, but as long as it's a Sikh community that emphasises only area is within the religious realm. So, you know, go to the Gurdwara on a Sunday, do Path, do Kirtan, they're all very happy with that. Their problem, they enjoy the langar. Their problem really centres around the idea that we consider ourselves a nation, that we consider ourselves as a sovereign nation. Although we are a sovereign nation, we, in 1947, we chose to stay within India. Now, there's not many communities who look at themselves as a 2% minority and would have the self-confidence to say, well, actually, you know, we will forego the idea of us having a sovereign state. We'll become part and parcel of India. Sanu Pokhni hegi azadi di. It was never there to start with, and now even, and since 84, hopefully I believe that the Sikh nation's coming to the conclusion that this is not a fight for independence, it's a fight for survival. Sikhi will prosper, Sikhi will go on. Bootte lagge bar mulka de vich ithe lagge, Canada, America, wherever you go, there is, you know, these spores have left India and they will continue to grow. But the environment in India is so toxic that really Sikhism cannot survive there in its present form and in its truest form within India as it stands. And it's not about the Congress and it's not about the BJP. It's about elites within India who've been the same elites. These are the descendants of the people that collaborated with the Mughals, the descendants of the people that collaborated with the British. It isn't about faith. It's not about religion. There really isn't a faith in religion when you talk about people at this level.
The Sikh isn't empowered anymore. Do you think that might be the case as well? That the Sikh is feeling weaker. I mean, if I just you take it, for instance, with the stories that we heard when we retreated, but when we went to the jungles, you know, we were down to the lowest numbers. But one thing they couldn't take, they could take our lives, they could slaughter our kids, they could slaughter the women, they could slaughter the things, but they couldn't take your Amrit Vela away, they couldn't take your Gursikhi away, they couldn't take your Rat away. Those things carried on and they existed. But is that the case? You know, does that Sikh still have that same kind of empowered feeling? You know, in the Ardas we can say Raj Karega Khalsa, we can say Deg Fateh, very empowering slogans, Panth Ki Jeet. But in reality, who believes that? You know, do Sikhs believe that? You know, and it's just a question I want to put forward, because I think we're only going to be as empowered as we are as individuals, as a nation, you know, perhaps, you know, that's our biggest problem at the moment. Sorry.
I think what you're talking about at that time, where the Sikhs were much more empowered, when they were living in jungles, and it comes back down to they were much closer to Maharaj. They had their Amrit Vela Pakka. That's what it was about for them. It was, they were much closer to the Sikhi in its truest form, and they were much closer to their Rat and their Amrit Vela and their Bani. They were proper Pakke. And now we've kind of modernized and westernized, and we've watered down that Sikhi. So people that stand up for what I was saying earlier about the principle-based ethics, in the media they're called hardliners, they're called extremists, but it's these same extremists and hardliners that stood up for the rest of India's rights when it was the independence movement against the Mughals, it was the independence movement against the British. It was these hardliners that the British at the time were calling extremists. You know, now it's the India calling us the extremists. Before it was the Mughals, then it was the British. It's always going to be like that. Sikhs will always be in conflict with legal systems that seek to oppress their populations. I mean, if you look at India, it's one of the most craziest countries. It calls itself the world's largest democracy. Half the population of that country is starving. You know, and they've got a space program. They receive billions from this country in aid. What our government wants to give them aid. You know, their people are starving out there. They're still divided on lines of caste. You know, and that plagues India. You'll never be able to cross a certain barrier in society in India because of the whole caste issue. I mean, if you look at and you go to any home, like in my home, my mum watches these stupid dramas that come on. I mean, they're absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they represent a warped version of. We all laugh because it's funny. It's like that in everybody's house. These dramas.
I think most people here have a Bollywood impression of India.
It's a Bollywood impression, but it represents such a warped perception of society, and it represents, totally distorted views where one woman's having a problem because she's educated and her husband's not, and real non-issues that have no meaning in society, and yet they occupy our lives. And the reason I'm talking about that is because Sikhi is based on ethical principles. I keep coming back to that, and it's those ethical principles that will make Sikhs put their heads on their line and say, do you know what? You can't oppress people because of their caste, because of their gender. I mean, the modern world made the United Nations Charter of Human Rights in the 19th century. Guru Nanak Dev Ji talked about universal human rights in the 14th century, talked about anti-slavery, talked about rights of women, talked about the rights of all people, regardless of caste or social status, education for all, spirituality, the ability that everybody should have the right, everyone should have access to healthcare. These things are ingrained in Sikhi, and we will always come into conflict. And this is what the Indian government needs to understand. They can never destroy Sikhi. We will never sit down quietly, because this is ingrained in our very existence. The more dharmic you become, I mean, like you're saying, they can never stop Gurdwara, they can't stop Kirtan, but the more dharmic you become, the more you jor with Bani, the more you're going to want to put your head on the line for these values. But you want to say something?
I mean, I see anti-India thing,
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh Ji. I think one of the reasons why Sikhs seem pretty. You said back in the day Sikhs were very close. Back in the day, Sikhs were very close to Satguru Maharaj and very close to their Sangat, and people today have drifted. I think another reason for why, in my personal opinion, I think we've been pretty poor in representing ourselves, is because of the government knows. The government of India, everything comes back to the government of India, because they run everything in India. Just Punjab alone is everything is run by Badal. It's like we all know the score, but the government knows that we get our strength from Sangat. So what have they done? Who are our leaders? Our leaders are all agents. Everybody knows. It's no secret. Everybody knows. Our leaders are agents, so who do we have to turn to? There's deliberate attempts to cause conflicts within the Sangat. So if you're focusing on these smaller issues, we just totally missed the wider picture. We've done this, we've made this mistake in 1947. Why are we continuing to make this mistake again? In addition to that, we don't have any, this is like the biggest thing. We've got no representation at all, not on a realistically, not on a UK level, not here, not on an international level. So where do we get our support from? This whole, we started off talking about Bharadwajana. This whole kind of episode was amazing. Without any leadership, we had Sikh leaders getting involved in giving speeches, but had they not, the unity would have still been there. Everybody heard Bharadwajana's letters. Yeah, everybody read them. And that wasn't. That kind of feeling is amazing. Now, Sikhs across the globe, there's not a single Gurdwara Sahib that I know of that didn't support the movement, right? So, does that mean that all Sikhs are supporting terrorism? No, it doesn't. Another point I would like to make with the whole Bharadwajana thing, the whole hanging thing, was absolutely disgusting. We're living in 2012. What government issues hanging to death, right, for a crime where the person hasn't actually taken a life? Bharadwajana did not kill anyone, yet he's been sentenced to death, and that's another thing that's been overlooked as well. After 17 years in prison, it's just an absolute joke. The Indian legal system is a joke. It really is. It's just an absolute joke.
Just to touch on a few points that both Bhaisabs have made. It's quite funny because I was thinking this on similar lines as well. Bhaisab asked that why are we in a state now, and is maybe the message changed? I think if you look at the political inactiveness we need to look at these religious institutions, the Sikh religious institutions. Bhai Sahib touched about it, that the Sikh leaders have come and done talks, but they came afterwards. They saw, I mean, even at the local Gurudwara in London, in Southall, we've got the Pradhan writing letters to the High Commissioner. We're amazed, thinking, wow, Apne Bhai Himmat Singh Sohi is writing letters to the thing. But it's because the people showed that voice, that this is what we're supporting, and the leaders will always follow. So that's why we should stop looking to the leaders, and the rest will come. But one question I've got is, with all these religious institutions and the Jathebandis and the Samprada, why have they abandoned the Miri Piri concept that Bhai Sahib was talking about? Why are they telling us that we shouldn't be politically active, even just to learn about the history? Why are they telling us that we should just do Simran, just do part? A good Sikh, is a complete Sikh, which means that everything, Seva, Simran, part, it's the lot, and that's the hard path that Maharaj talks about. Bhai Sahib, you mentioned about the worries that came from the Rara Sahib, Samprata and stuff. These were the sons themselves. They weren't like the followers, the Chelle. They were the sons themselves, the Babaji themselves, at the age of 119 when they were arrested. 119 when they were arrested. At that ripe age, that they were leading the front line. So I ask today, that while their sons were frontline, why are today the same Samprata still exists? Why are they not even, forget frontline, why are they not even encouraging their followers to even learn, let alone getting involved? Why are they telling us that we shouldn't be involved in these things? Bhai Sahib mentioned about the Gurukar across the countries, across the world. After 1984, if you look at the Des Pardes publication that still comes out today, practically every single page after June 84 was taken out by Gurukars all across the country, and they took full page ads to say that we're holding a Akhand Paths in our Gurukar to commemorate the Shaheeds. And these Gurdwaras, if you read the list, I'm talking about Sohar Gurdwara, I'm talking about even sects like Darshan Das took out full page ads to say that we commemorate the Shaheed Singhs for laying down their lives. So everyone who goes to these Gurdwara, why are those Gurdwara now turning their backs on it? Because they can't say that it was wrong, because if they say it was wrong, then it means that the people, like their sons who were before them, were wrong as well. I posed this question on the internet a few months ago, that this Soharod Gurdwara, the Jatha and stuff, the Shkam Seva Jatha, they published a publication, and it was called Bloody India or something, and it had pictures of Shaheed Singhs. It set out the historical concept from the context from 1947 and even before, how the Sikhs had been violated, how our rights had not been given to us, and that how the Sikhs, Shaheed Singh, they were so great because they took action to try and deliver justice, and they were just agitating for their equal rights. And I asked a question, I said, so if your Jathebandi now says that's wrong, so are you saying that the same Jathebandi who was receiving letters from Sanjay Sinji, and they display those letters, are they wrong now, or were they wrong then? That's the question I've got to ask.
Anybody else?
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think I just carrying on what Bhai Sahib was saying. I mean, again, during Bhai Rajwana's situation, towards the end, once we knew Bhai Rajwana wasn't going to be hanged, but there was still the I Pledge Orange campaign. There was still the push to find on human rights. We had the Sikh leaders, especially the UK Sikh leaders, I think were really out of tune with what the locals, what the Singhs, what all the Gurdwaras united on. Now, for example, I think at 10 Downing Street, I've seen it on Sangat TV, and I've seen the pictures and everything. I would like to know basically who was actually there to discuss about the Panth, about Panthic issues. Who was leading those things? I mean, I didn't see anything like that. I just saw people with personal agendas pushing their own personal agendas, their own business agendas forward. And if that's our leaders, then we won't get anywhere with that. We really need to make sure that we really, you would expect your leaders to know the pulse, feel the pulse of what's happening in the thing. Just one more point I just wanted to pick up on. Through this whole Bhai Rajwana situation, a character like Badal had to react to an Akal Takht Adesh, not even a Hukmnama, but an Adesh. He reacted, and he actually managed to stop the hanging of Bhai Rajwana. Now, all those Gurdwaras, all those committees, all those individual Granthis who go against Akal Takht Maryada, for example, the ones who do meat sharab, the ones who do mixed marriages between people who have no respect for Sikhi values, those Granthis who take malas through to party halls and all this, what excuse do you have? If a character like Badal has to feel that he has to bow down to Akal Takht, then all Gur Sikhs have to bow down to Akal Takht. Waheguru Ji Khalsa.
I've just one quick thing to point out as well. It's written in the Director General of Punjab, ex-Director General of Punjab, Julius Ribeiro, that they had a meeting, a high-level meeting of senior diplomats and senior Indian ministers when Baba Joginder Singh, Sandhya Singh Ji's father, was starting the same Amrit Sanchar, Prachar and stuff. So it shows you that they are concerned about these things. I mean, why would a high-level meeting be called about this being an issue why are they afraid of this and stuff?
Okay, I just want to say one quick thing as well. We should all respect Akal Takht and its sovereignty as an institution, but we can't be blind to the fact that Balwant Singh didn't want to appeal to the sentence. He didn't want to do these things. But Akal Takht, not only did they ask for an appeal, well, the Jathedars of Akal Takht, not only did they ask for an appeal, they also put the onus on the Badal Sarkar. In terms of, on the surface of it, it looks like it was a good thing that they did. They pushed the political figures. But we got to realize this is the throne of the Sikh nation. This is the center of our sovereignty. The Sikh empire existed before India as a nation. India came into existence in 1947. You're saying Banda Singh Bahadur, he established the Sikh empire back then, and then Maharaja Ranjit Singh with the Sikh empire came after that. So the Sikh nation as an entity predates India as a country. So the Akal Takht should take the lead, and they should, if they're going to approach the president, they should approach it themselves, not ask some puppet politician to do it. And also, just want to say, if you want to learn more about the police officers, there's a very good YouTube channel that Najwan set up called Rajwana TV on YouTube. I don't know if you guys have seen it. And also the I Pledge Orange thing, there's a website, ipledgeorange.net, that's set up if you want to find out more about that campaign.
One really, really quick point. When I was talking about Sikh representation, something that I'm sure a lot of us get is, something that I think a lot of us get is, the Prime Minister's a Sikh, you've got Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and that's like the worst possible response that you could actually get. When Manmohan Singh went into power, firstly, everybody needs to understand the nation didn't elect him and say, wow, let's have a Sikh to lead us. He was appointed by the Congress Party. The Congress Party is the same party that carried out the genocide of Sikhs in 1984. There's other genocides, but I'm on about the November genocide in 1984, which is recognized as a genocide by both India and by the government in Canada. Okay, so it was a genocide. And in addition to that, when Manmohan Singh went into power, 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 of the main perpetrators who led mobs to kill, rape, beat, loot, Sikh homes, businesses, women, children, 3 of them were given cabinet positions. This is our government, this is our Indian government, this is our Manmohan Singh. So is Manmohan Singh, can we consider Manmohan Singh a representation of the Sikhs? No, we can't. Just so I'd quickly make that point. Zal Singh is another joke. That's another story for another day.
I mean, going back to leadership, Harinder Singh from Sikri recently did a talk at the in a prestigious London PwC building, and he opened the conversation, the discussion with a very valid point. He goes, the sign of a leader is when the person can stand and look back and see who's following them. And I think, there's no better way of describing a leader today, because I think people who are self-appointed, people who we think are leaders, I think they need to turn back and see, who's actually following them. Do they feel the pulse of the nation? And we're all accused of this. We've all got to take responsibility of this. Perhaps we're pushing the wrong people forward. Perhaps we're being lazy, and perhaps we're willing to just watch other people go forward and misrepresent us. And disheartened as it was, I saw the pictures of 10 Downing Street and I was disheartened. I thought it was a prestigious event. This is supposed to be Vaisakhi, and something about it just, I didn't like it. And, the accusations, there's various accusations, we won't even go into that. But again, are we that connected? Are our leaders that connected to us? And, Paisa, just as a management consultant, let's refer to your skills here. I mean, you have an appreciation of leadership. You have an understanding of what leadership's about. What should we be doing? What should we be doing now as a community to get up? Because I go back to empowerment. I go back to maybe us lacking in being leaders, because perhaps the leaders are sitting in this room, at this very perhaps the leaders in the Langar hall now, doing Pandya Di Seva. Perhaps the leaders are there, They're not the guys who we're putting forward. I certainly don't recognize them as leaders anymore, because I don't see, especially the last few weeks have shown me that they sit on the fence. I think they sit on the fence for so long that, they've got splinters. I mean, literally, I don't think they're taking anything forward. So what's your view, Paisab?
Well, I mean, I think when we talk about leaders, we talk about leaders of the Sikh nation, and of course, our homeland is still in the Punjab, which happens to be under the occupation of India. So the difficulty is that we don't have a normal environment in which to grow and nurture our leaders. I draw back on the same thing, and I think sometimes people start to think, we're always blaming India. Is it always India to blame? Well, in many cases, yes, it is. The situation is such that it's not our leaders really that are moving forward. Our leaders are placed in positions. It's only the people that the overlords want to come into positions of power that do. And when we have people who are genuine leaders, who are genuine Sikhs, then they're labelled as extremists and militants. And as with Sant Jarnail Singh Ji Bhindranwale, you can see what happens. A true Sikh leader, what happens to him? So you can see in the context of India, it's almost impossible, whilst we stay within India, to actually have a political dialogue and have a true Sikh leader emerge from there. It could happen, but it will happen along with the conflict, the bloodshed, and everything that goes.
Outside of India, do you think that's the way forward then?
Possibly. I mean, who can say? I think that the important point to make, though, I think that everybody should try and understand, and that is that we don't have a future within the Indian state. It's that simple. India. We think of it as this, the world's largest democracy is this kind of this entity that's been around, and the Indians try very hard to push this point that India as an idea has existed for millennia. The truth is, it's a polyglot. I mean, Winston Churchill said that India was as much a country as the equator, and that's absolutely right. It's the size of Western Europe. Look how many countries exist within Western Europe, and India is supposed to be one country. I mean, what similarity is there between somebody from Punjab and, let's say, somebody from Goa or Bangalore? The language is different, the culture is different, the religion's different. Their experience within history as people, as nations, is entirely different. India will have to, and despite their best interest, will have to disintegrate. So, Baji, to just answer your question, I think that within India it's almost impossible really for us to try and to get a leader, and if we do, then we're going to have the same sort of problems that we did the last time.
Thank you for that, Paisab. I mean, as ever, I think this discussion's really just heated up now anyway, and if we could have another hour, then I think we could take this discussion forward. But unfortunately, our time's running out, and no doubt we will carry on this discussion at a further time. But touching on your points, Paisab, about leadership, and just something that maybe look back at how leadership came from the times of the British Raj, and where the Gadars and the likes of Kartar Singh Srabha came from outside, and perhaps that may be something that happens forward, because we don't have a political voice. I don't believe we have a political voice in India, and perhaps the political voice will come from the UK. And if that's the case, then we should be supportive. We should be taking an active part in the UK politics, and take our forward. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it took a week of reaction here before India reacted. So you have a time. We're fortunate. We've got the Sikh channel. We've got our own media, and we are independent thinking people. Been born and brought up in the UK with a Western mindset. We're not as enslaved as perhaps our parents are and our grandparents are, and that's to our advantage. That is a big advantage. Perhaps we can have the real uncorrupted Sikh psyche and the Sikh way of life. But unfortunately, time's coming up. I apologise to people in the audience that wanted to put a point forward as well. We'll have another chance. We're not anti-India. We're not anti any religion. This is a discussion that we want to put forward and see certain issues. Yeah, anti-oppression. That's what this discussion is about. It's about anti-oppression. So without further ado, I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for taking part. I'd like to thank the Paisabs who've come from other parts of London for coming down. I'd like to thank the committee of Gurdwara Singh Sabha London East for allowing us to use the room, and thank you again Sikh Channel for coming down and taking our views. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.